East St. Louis is unique. That's one way of beginning it, I guess. Because it's right across from St. Louis, the big city, people from St. Louis would come for entertainment. Because St. Louis was such a Catholic community, St. Louis had a 12 o'clock curfew until when I was in school. So it meant that everybody from St. Louis at 12 o'clock came across to East St. Louis. And some people in my generation, remembered Chuck Berry and so many of the people who were musicians at that time, Ike and Tina Turner, were living in East St. Louis. You've always had it being an ideal place for business. So you had railroads, I think it was 20-something railroads that came through here, going from east to west, the bridges that were across. But you also had places like the aluminum ore, which was one of the I think the largest aluminum ore company in the United States during World War I. And so you had these, and you had a steel mill that was here. And the second largest stockyards in the United States, second to Chicago, was right here in East St. Louis.
Playing and running, and we did that at Lincoln Park. It was right a few blocks from where we lived on Broadway. We'd go down 17th Street, and there was a park. We were happy. There were some things that didn't go well. There were certain places we weren't supposed to even be on certain streets. That did bother me. It bothered. At a young age, I would always say, well, why can't we go over there? We couldn't pass Missouri. We couldn't cross Missouri. That meant you get to Missouri and you stop.
We always say that we were conceived in East St. Louis, but born in St. Louis, because the two hospitals in East St. Louis could not allow blacks to be born there. So we were born in, like Barnes Hospital had a black section in St. Louis. So I was born there. So in our documents about us, people always ask us, where were you born? And we said, well, that's a tricky question because we were actually born in St. Louis, but we lived in East St. Louis and we were conceived here. And a few weeks after we were born, we came back to East St. Louis. So we were born in St. Louis and raised in East St. Louis.
I come from a very big family, one son and 3 sets of twins. So we didn't get lonely. We were not lonely at all. And we went to things that were important. So I was a happy child, very happy. Didn't worry about. We had Armenians who lived around us who were friendly. We played together. So we didn't recognize the real world until I finished elementary school and went into 7th. We knew we couldn't go to Jones Park. They would have little operas out there, good singing and that kind of thing. And once in a while, the people who worked there could bring us with them. The people who worked on the lawn and people in the kitchen, they would do that, they would bring us. But we knew that we couldn't cross that, but we didn't know what would happen if we do go over there. But as things grew in East St. Louis, that was a good question, because there were leaders here who would ask that kind of question, maybe not in those words, but why can't we go there? Our tax dollars have to pay that, so why can't we? It took a few years before those persons started walking. They called it marching today, but it was walking. And they were walking and all. I was not successful at that because I wouldn't accept everything. And they took, but 2 or 3, Jean was one that said, you're not going to be able to do this, Lillian. You're not going to be able to do it. I said, why not? She said, you won't be able to do it, but I'm wishing you can. Surely enough, I think I walked for about 10 minutes. And the reason was that calling us names didn't bother me. I just ignored that. But when you throw garbage, no, I have to respond.
In high school, we had our sports programs. We had a Lincoln High School, and there were 2 black schools in St. Louis, Vashon and three, Vashon, Washington Tech, and Sumner. And that was the conference, because none of the white schools around here would play Lincoln.
There's a lot of stories that are not being told about East St. Louis and in East St. Louis. That you have a lot of gifts and assets, and oftentimes people look at the deficiencies and they don't see that there's so many gifts here and people are using them, but they just don't have as many of the resources to make them, fly in the same way that they may fly in a bigger city with more resources. And so East St. Louis, a lot of people are doing a lot with a little. I see a historical framework for a lot of the people who have been here for longer and who know the community, a sense of the community identity, basically. And that is something, it's something actually strong, because there are a lot of communities that are thriving in ways but don't have an identity. People don't feel like they belong to that community. They don't feel like it has meaning to them. Like, there is such a sense of belonging to this community. And that's actually a really powerful asset. And I think that's an asset of collective memory, of collective consciousness, that I think can be leveraged for solidarity in the future. So that's like a major one, I would say.
You may hear much negativity, but if you've lived there, you know that it's a nurturing community still, that it has an opportunity to rise that's not present in many cities. You're accepted for who you are and not necessarily for your birthright or for what position you might hold. If you're a good person, you're valued for that. And I don't care what your other situation might be, if you're not going to be respected. As far as what you see, it's very easy for a casual observer to look and be not necessarily impressed. My wife is from a small southern town, and she often says, well, I talk to East St. Louisans, black and white, who have grown up there, and they all speak so highly of it. And she said, but I can't envision that. I said, what you're missing is the people, and not necessarily buildings and shallow things. So that's the strength that has always existed in East St. Louis. The goodness of the people and the willingness of people to give someone an opportunity to rise.
I have found East St. Louis to be a community filled with beautiful, generous, loving people, many of whom just lack the basic resources to thrive. At this point in time, there is a great hope. I mean, we have so many kids with such possibility and promise, and the school district is making a lot of improvement and working very hard to increase the educational opportunities and achievement of our children. And along with that, our community now has a collective impact movement, which involves and is anchored by 3 basic collaboratives, which the school district is involved in each of these collaboratives, and it's the Early Learning Partnership, St. Clair County Youth Council, which deals with behavioral and social emotional health, and the Youth Development Alliance, which is the out of school time collaborative. And those are all filled with the different agencies in the city and the citizens who are working to try to improve the policies and the practices that will help the children and the families thrive in East St. Louis.
You know, we have people tell us that they go to bed at night and they can't sleep because of the constant shooting. When they hear gunshots, they get out of their beds and roll on the floor so that they won't get hit. People have their car windows shot out. It can be pretty rough. Not all the time, and not all developments. The ones that tend to have people who are not working and have what should I say? Less opportunity, maybe less drive, maybe. some of the developments can be pretty rough and pretty chaotic, especially for children.
The bigger picture is for the people who care to stay and figure it out. So that's why I think that more people, outside people, should be aboard with, helping us grow and build our city to what it's capable of being. And I think that I'm capable of being part of the solution, and I want God to use me in that way, because I love my city, I love the people in my city, and I just want us to be where we can. Sometimes when you live on the outside, you see a picture that people paint, or things you read that kind of will make you turn your head, like don't want to be a part of that city. But it's a lot of good people here. It's a lot of people doing a lot of good things. And sometimes we get overlooked, the people get overlooked because of the violence and the other things that outweigh the goodness. But there's a lot of good things that happen in the city that gets overlooked.
Public housing was originally created to address the unsafe and unsanitary housing conditions in the U.S. and to provide low-income families with decent housing. The only true factor to the way that it was created was that it is low-income families residing. It's unsafe and it's not decent housing. I think that there are some that assume that people living in public housing, that's the condition of, that's what they created for themselves, and that's all that they aspire to. But that's untrue. Everyone that's living in public housing or has some type of subsidy, rental subsidy through HUD, pay 30% of their income. And the more that they make in income, as they increase in income, their rent increases. So they do not have the opportunity to save money because the rent steadily increases with your income.
For myself, like when you move into housing, you use it as the stepping stone to hopefully get to the next stage where you can move out on your own. But it's just like you get stuck there because one of the reasons is because it is based off your income. But if your income change, your rent goes up, and then as far as you saving money, you can't save money now because your rent went up. So your goal of moving out becomes longer because your rent is now higher than you thought it was going to be. People judge and say, oh, they need to get a job and such and such, such and such, or we, talk different about a person because you don't understand the situation. I had a friend who stayed in the Roosevelts and her rent got up to $900. So she stopped working a job. And, so I just wish that we would find a different format for the situation so that we can actually be able to say that we're doing something to grow instead of just going into a cycle that just keeps repeating itself.
We saw families coming into Catholic Urban Program seeking financial assistance to move out of those conditions. Unfortunately, with the government funding that we have through our homeless prevention program, they did not qualify because they are not at risk of being homeless and they are not homeless. They have subsidized housing. But to see these moms walk out trying to leave these unsafe conditions but didn't have the financial means to do so was heartbreaking. So we set out to address that issue. that people wanting to leave, that have the means to pay market rate housing, but couldn't pay like first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposit in order to leave those, the public housing developments. So we created anchors to help provide them with that assistance to move. And it was the only stipulation is that they had to be able to afford market rate housing. So we didn't take people who were not ready, who really need the subsidy. We took people who were in those developments paying $700, $800, $900, and that's 30% of their income on rent. And so we assisted those families and created this program to assist those families with relocating into safe, decent, and stable housing.
You know, economic development is really, I think, the key to helping any area. When people have jobs that will pay a decent wage and they feel like they can live decently, perhaps purchase a house or do things for their kids that they want to do. There's a terrible dearth of jobs here. If you want to work, you've got to go to Belleville or you've got to go to St. Louis particularly. And a lot of those jobs are pretty far out. So unfortunately, a lot of the jobs that are available to people are on the Metrolink, which has been a help. But you've got jobs at the ballpark as concessionaires and cleaners. And you've got jobs in the hotels as porters and food service people. You've got jobs at some of the motels around as housekeepers and food service people. But those jobs tend to be seasonal, and they also tend to be low wage and pretty much dead end. So there's just a real lack of employment opportunity, which is I think key. If somehow things could be developed on the waterfront using the river, or at one time this was a very heavy industry city, and they back in, let's say, anywhere from maybe 1900 to maybe to 1960, the jobs were plentiful, good jobs.
My self-interest is to develop generational wealth for myself and others, and the generation of Black people specifically having access to experiences, having exposure, a wealth of joy, a wealth of hope, a wealth of opportunity, and of course, yes, a wealth of financial security. People have access to good income, an upward mobility of income, begin to understand how money flows within our economy, understand what ownership looks like, understand how to manage the resources that we receive, then the community shifts, right? Then the more middle class families we have in East St. Louis, the higher tax revenue, the greater tax revenue the city has, the greater tax revenue the city has, the more services the city can provide, the better the school systems can be. So it's a domino effect of making sure that people have the hope and the access to economic mobility. And as a result of that, they then will understand what education looks like. Then they'll have access to education, and their children will have access to quality education. And then they'll have access and exposure to a clean, healthy, safe environment, because now we've created a revenue base for the city to provide those services, and we've positioned that family to elevate.
I love my city, and I want to see my city thrive and get to its full potential. And I know it's possible, and I'm going to keep that hope alive that we can grow and become a beautiful city. So I want to see us and challenge people to help out however you can. Small things have a great impact, you know. It's small things that count.